All right, we are live. Shalom and welcome to the Yishai Fleischer Show. And we're going to have our first discussion with a candidate for this upcoming Knesset, for this upcoming elections. And I'm just going to wait for a few minutes for everybody to join in and then to welcome our guest today, Simcha Rothman, Advocate Simcha Rothman. So come on to the show. Let me know if the sound is good, if the video is good, if everything is working well for you. And we can't wait to discuss with you. And get ready with your questions. I'll do my best to get to your questions on the show and to ask the candidate. We're going to meet the candidate in just another minute. I'm just waiting for everybody to show up. Do me a favor, if it looks good, if it sounds good, send me a little note here, and I'll be able to see it wherever you're looking on either Facebook, YouTube, or Periscope, Twitter. And I'm excited to kind of welcome the season. Well, Purim is over, right? We finished Purim. We finished our drinking. I drank for 3 days straight. Really, it was a really, because I'm very machmir on this mitzvah. So I was very serious about this commandment. And now it's time to talk turkey. It's time to get serious about the future. So I see that Michael Semper says sound and vision are great, and Maury says it's good, and Larry says sound and video are great, and Alana says looks good. My good friend Alana. Hi, Alana. And Patrice says everything's good, which means that it's time to start the show. So let's get to it. Let's get ready for a second here, and we'll get it started. Shalom and welcome to the Yishai Fleischer Show, broadcasting live from Judea to the world. You're a part of it wherever you are. So we finished Purim. It was awesome, right? We're getting ready for Pesach, but we're getting ready for another aspect of post-Purim, which is the awesome fourth elections in the last 2 years. And on March 23rd, indeed, the Jewish people in Israel, and actually all the citizens of Israel, Jews and non-Jews alike, are going to be voting for the 24th Knesset. And there's a lot of interesting parties and changes from the previous voting patterns may be taking place this year. We have an interesting new party, which is called the Religious Zionist Party. Now, the Religious Zionist Party is a nationalistic party, so-called right wing here in Israel, and they have a candidate who's the Anglo candidate, if you will. He's not actually an Anglo, but he just speaks English really well, and his name is Advocate Simcha Rothman. He has an illustrious history in his young life. He's the founder and legal advisor for the movement of governability and democracy. And we have one word for that in Hebrew. It's called Meshilut. Meshilut, it's like hold on to the reins and drive this thing in a real way. He's a leading voice in the fight against judicial activism and for proper separations of powers in Israel. And I think that it is not coincidental that we're interviewing Advocate Simcha today, since today is the day we're going to get to this, which is the Supreme Court's big decision that Reform conservative conversions must be accepted by the state of Israel to give citizenship to those who have converted here in Israel through Reform conservative conversions. Simcha deals with complex relations between appointed and elected officials, and represents Meshilut in appeals files before the Israeli Supreme Court and various Knesset members. He's got degrees from Northwestern University and Tel Aviv University and Bar Ilan University. He learned at the yeshiva Keren B'Yavna and also served as a chaplain in the combat engineering corps of the Israel Defense Forces. It is my pleasure to welcome, let's see how I get this right, exit solo, and let him in, Advocate Simcha Rothman. Thanks so much for joining us today on the show.
Hi, shalom, shalom. Thank you for having me.
It's really fun to have you, and let's get first for people to get to know who you are. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where do you live? How many kids you have? And how is it that you learned English so well?
Okay, so I live in Gush Etzion. I live in Pnei Kedem in southeast Gush Etzion. We see the Dead Sea, Yam HaMelach, from my window. Baruch Hashem, very, very, very good place to live. You really feel, and it's a small one. It's what you call the new settlements. It's a small settlement. We're just now in the path to get all the approvals on the place. My wife Hannah will speak about her later because she's one of the connections that I have with Aliyah and Olim. She was born, of course, in Israel, but her parents came and made right after the wedding and made Aliyah. And first she's from Neve Aliza. I am originally from Bnei Brak, and I have 5 children. And you said what I did in the past 8 years with Meshilut and the legal work, and now I am happy that I joined Tzionut Datit, the religious Zionist party with Bezalel Smotrich. I think we have a very diverse list of people from all areas of political and legal and social and economical work. Many good people that are working already 24. I would say 24/6, but it's actually 24/7 for everything that Tzionut Datit stands for everything that right-wing ideology in Israel stands for.
Right. You know, the word right wing is not always makes sense. Doesn't always make sense across the seas. People don't understand. We're talking about nationalism. We're talking about Jewish nationalism. We're talking about moving the state of Israel forward on proper tracks. One of the things that you've been doing is trying to disentangle, create a kind of separation of powers, disentangle some of the, I guess, old ways that the government of Israel has been operating, the bureaucracy. Let's talk a little bit about something that is all over the news today and is so important to the Jewish people at large. That is the question of Reform conservative conversions. Now, the state of Israel, as I understand it, has already for a long time accepted Reform conservative conversions from well-known communities to accept them as citizens of the state of Israel, to fall under the law of return. But the change now is also for conversions done in Israel under the Reform Conservative banner. And this could affect a lot of the migrants or workers that are here in Israel and other people who want to potentially get, a kind of lighter, easier form of conversion, get through it, and then merit to have the option to become citizens of the state of Israel. So here you are. You're now in a position of potentially being a Knesset member in the upcoming elections. What do you think about this law? What do you think about the Supreme Court's decision? I would say
the Supreme Court decision. That's exactly the problem. Legislation might be a better way to deal with this issue, and some would say it's the fault of the Knesset because the Knesset did not legislate this issue for 15 years. That's the claim of the court. It's actually not really true because the Knesset cannot legislate, and that's a major issue we're trying to solve with what you spoke before about the separation of powers in Israel. If we would be able to legislate something that the Knesset will agree on, and we will know this is the solution, that's what will stay, there would be easy ways to legislate, and there would be even ways for trial and error. You would say, okay, we try something, it didn't work, let's change legislation. Once the Supreme Court basically has a veto on all legislation in Israel, in a way without any basis, but the ideas, the politics, the people in the Supreme Court applying their own views on the state of Israel. So once you legislate something that they don't like, they cancel it. And once you do legislate something that they do like, they won't let you legislate anything else, and they will say, oh, you can't do that. So this creates a problem for legislation to solve this problem. But let's talk about the real...
Right, that's macro, right? That's a macro of what's called...
Let's talk about the real issue.
Just to say one word here, that's an activist court, right? And Israel is famous for having one of the most activist court in Western legal type systems. And that's one of the things that you've been fighting against. But all right, let's talk a little bit about the specific of this issue.
The issue itself. It's not a secret. The majority of the Jewish communities and people outside of Israel are not Orthodox Jews, Reform, conservative, all kinds. Some of them non-affiliated at all, but that's not a question now we're talking about. The majority that identifies themselves as Jews are Reform conservatives. Israel connection with those Jews, even though personally, of course, I think it's a mistake. I think it's not the right way to live life according to Judaism. But the connection with them is important, even if we don't agree. It's very important to have a connection with those people They are Jews, they are our brothers, and we want the connection with them. Therefore, Israel, you can say it's a little bit problematic, but we understand what you get. If someone converted in a community in the US, for example, to a Reform community, lived there for a few years, became part of the community, and then he says, "Oh, I feel myself so good as the part of the Jewish people. I want to make Aliyah. I want to come to Israel." Because his community there recognize him as Jew, we will say, okay, in Israel it wouldn't work. That was the case until now. But if you recognize him as Jews, because of the connection we want with you, we will accept him also as an Oleh, as a Jew. Of course, it creates a lot of problems how the marriage in Israel will work, what will happen. It creates problems, but we're willing to accept this problem for the sake of the connection between the different parts of the Jewish people. What's happening now, and it's a problem, and the legislation did not take care of that, but we know the problem. It's very limited in size, and it didn't happen so much in the past. It's a more symbolic kind of thing. Now we're talking about having this happen in Israel. In Israel, the incentive for someone who is here and is not Jewish to become Jew and stay here legally is very strong. The incentive if he wants to do it, just take, for example, someone who comes from the Filipinos, and he wants to come to, and he's in Israel, is a foreign worker in Israel, and he wants to stay in Israel. If he wants to become an Israeli citizen because he met someone, fell in love with someone, doesn't matter. He has to go through a lengthy process. It doesn't go easy for him. Now you're giving him a very easy way without any commitment, real commitment, and it will be very hard to define because there are not really communities, established communities, large numbers of communities that are Reform or conservative in Israel. There are only very few, and you are giving a big incentive for those people to just say, okay, instead of going through the lengthy process of becoming an Israeli citizen, we will call ourselves Jews. We will join a congregation in a Reform. It doesn't require us to do Brit Milah. It doesn't require us to observe any parts of the mitzvot. It doesn't require us anything. We just want to say, okay, that's what we want to be, and we will become Jews. So it's a very grave danger, and I wouldn't say it myself. One of the judges in the decision that supported the decision said that this is a grave danger to the state of Israel. That's his words, not mine. So it's a grave danger. The court did it. The court stepped in a place he shouldn't have. The fact that he's waiting for 15 years, I'm not impressed. Sorry, but I'm not impressed. The rights of Jews to daven on the Temple Mount, the right of Jews to go there free and do and do work and worship. That's a right that is in the basic law of Israel. There is a basic law saying that the right of any member of any religion to go to his sacred place and exercise his religion will not be interfered. And the court, time and again, when people came and says we want to go on Temple Mount and do tefillah and daven there, the court says, no, you can't do that, and I'm not gonna enforce the law on the government because I understand it's very delicate and there are problems. So the court understands that on delicate and important issues, he knows how to step back because he understands the dangers. Here the court says, okay, I'm gonna step in and I will make the danger that I see the danger, and I don't care that I create a danger by my own ruling. And we are, we're committed to solve both issues, both the issue of judicial activism at large and and also the issue of conversion in Israel, to make sure that only state-recognized conversions, recognized by, of course, by the authorities in Israel, which are by the Rabbanut and by the Orthodox Halacha, only this will be recognized in Israel. That's part of our promise to our voters, and basically to the Jewish people. It's not only to our voters. Our voters will be affected less by this issue than the regular person in Israel. Is not very strongly connected to a specific community, doesn't want to check lists, different lists, who the person is going to marry or his children going to marry. Is he really Jew? Can he marry? So here's the one. This person that is not really very. It's not. Is not ultra orthodox. Is not even. Is not very. Is not even observant. But he does want himself and his children to marry Jews and not to have this kind of problems in Israel.
You know, I just want to remind people that the sages kind of say that during the time of King David, when Israel was, again, a kind of very powerful and attractive country, they shut down at that time conversion because people were coming in for the wrong reasons. People weren't converting because they wanted to get close to the God of Israel. They were converting because they wanted to live in an economically strong country. And that's what's happening again today. And yet this decision by the court kind of opens it up much, much further. And I guess I would like to also ask, I had a little tweet war with somebody on Twitter, and he was saying to me, like, you guys are disgusting because you don't want to give citizenship to this. He actually mentioned a Filipino worker who's been here for 15 years, like you mentioned. And I just asked him, like, why does this Filipino worker need necessarily Israeli citizenship, which means voting in Israel and then accepting a kind of this reduced form of Judaism, which there's no oversight whether the person means it. Why can't we just talk about residency? If somebody wants residency here in Israel, maybe we can find some kind of status for residency. But why necessarily go all the way to citizenship to accept him as a Jew and to accept him as a citizen? Why can't there be a more developed residency package?
So there is a residency package, but people don't want it. People want to be full citizens. There are some differences, not a lot, but there are some differences. But there are residency. But also, Israel immigration policy. Israel was established on the promise to be the homeland of the Jewish people. We have people that are non-Jews in Israel, but we want to make sure that Israel will stay the homeland of the Jewish people. There is the basic law saying that, but in order to make sure that the laws, the public sphere of Israel and the culture in Israel will remain hospitable, that the Jews will feel here that's their home. You need to keep and observe the Jewish majority in Israel. And the Jewish majority in Israel in the past few years has declined. We are losing numbers because people don't know that. But most of the people that came to Israel in the past year through the law of return, I'm not talking about illegal infiltrators, don't count them in. I'm not talking about tourists who overextend their visas. I'm talking about people that came here under the law of return. Most of them are not Jews, they're not identified themselves as Jews. We are also promising to change that. But it's not that they're not, I'm not talking about they're not halachically Jews. I'm talking about they don't have any connections. They don't even want to become Jews, some of them do want. And the only connections they have to Judaism is that one of their grandparents was Jew. And even though some of them are Christians, and they are coming here, they can get the Aliyah package because and this is a misuse of the system that the Jewish people built in order to make Israel the safe haven and the place for every Jew around the world. And we're using it for other reasons that I don't understand why. So we need to change that.
My beloved family member of mine, Matthew Rosen, who's also a great lawyer, writes, he says, LOL, laughing, like there's throngs of people dying to do Reform Jewish conversion just to slip through Israeli immigration laws. A huge bunch of BS and a non-issue, except to create fear for political reasons against non-observant Jews. So Matt says, this is really a non-issue. Why are you making it in such a big issue? That's what he's asking.
Okay, it's a non-issue. That's why the number 4 in the Avodah list, Rabbi Gilad Karev, a reform rabbi, of course, and that applied to the Supreme Court, he says it's a big deal. He says it's a big development. Apparently, he wants also to frighten some non-observant Jews in Israel. Observant and non-observant Jews are Orthodox Jews. Even the non-observant, it doesn't have anything to do with observance. The majority of the people of Israel circumcise their children. In order to become a reformed Jew, the conversion, you don't have to circumcise. In Israel, the most of the people of Israel observe Pesach in the Orthodox way. Most of them, 80-90%. It doesn't mean if you don't have to be observant. No one observes all the mitzvot except maybe the greatest rabbis. I'm talking about there are levels of observance in Israel, and even the secular Jews in Israel, many of them keep kosher. Many of them, definitely most of them, do not want their children to marry a non-Jew. Those issues that when you look at reform communities in the U.S., some reform communities does not say anything against intermarriage. They maybe they don't encourage it, but it's not a problem. This kind of issues. So the Israeli, even the non-observant, and I have to say, I got during the past 24 hours, it was maybe even about 24 hours, more responses to this ruling from non-observant Jews, from secular Jews, who were very worried about this issue. That they said they again, as I said, it's more of a problem for the non-observant Jew in Israel than to the observant Jew in Israel, and that's why I'm sorry that this guy thinks like that, but it's a real problem and needs a real solution.
Right. This guy happens to be a good friend and a family member, but I want to say that I think maybe Advocate Simcha, what is very important to understand is around the world, there are tons of people, hundreds of thousands of people who try to come in yearly to become citizens of the state of Israel. People are coming from African countries where they're trying to migrate. So you have the whole South Tel Aviv is full of African migrants. Russian non-Jews who come on the back of the Russian Jewish Aliyah movement, which my parents were part of, but a huge amount of non-Jews that want to come and get citizenship here and live here because they're coming to a country that's healthier, better off economically, etc. So I think coming from a perspective of an American Jew and saying, "Oh, who wants to come to Israel as a Reformed Jew?" That is I think a little bit seeing it from a very small angle of an American Jew. The truth of the matter is, in the globe where people are having low standards of living, people that have a chance to get a different opportunity. Look at all the Arab migration into Europe. And the African migration, Arab migration into Europe, it's similar. There's a yearning to come to the Jewish state. It's seen as a very good place to live in. All right, let's go on to a different topic. Simcha, you've been presenting yourself like Dov Lipman did when he ran for Knesset and was a Knesset member, as kind of your congressman in Knesset. We don't have geographic representation here in Israel, and so you can't go to your congressman. And my good friend. My good friend Gidon says, when you write to a Knesset member, he doesn't write you back like they do from the staff of a congressman. They say to you, "Oh, you say, I'm from your district. I need help with this." So the congressman or his staff writes you back pretty quickly, and you get your representative is really your representative. Here in Israel, a lot of times we elect somebody because they have similar opinions to ours. But once they get elected, you never hear from them again because they're not actually beholden to a certain geographic constituency. So and within that, you've tried to be kind of your congressman in Knesset, and we'll see. Maybe you'll get elected. But what are some of the issues that you see that Anglos, right, English speakers from the various countries English-speaking countries that live here in Israel, what do you think are some of the issues that they're facing, and how do you propose to solve them?
Okay, so first, a little bit about my background. I promised in the beginning why I feel that Anglos and Olim in general, but Anglo Olim even more, are yes, they are my constituency. First, my family made Aliyah not so long ago from the U.S. In 1910. about 110, 111 years ago. So I'm Oleh Hadash, and but really, once an Oleh, always an Oleh, and especially when you're coming from an English-speaking country. Again, my English is not from there. You can hear my accent. I have an Israeli accent. I can't fool anyone, but my family were always, some of them, my cousins made Aliyah, came back from the U.S., Canada, Australia. My family is scattered is all over the globe. And also when I got married, my wife's family from Chicago, and they live in the Ve'aliza in Ginot Shomron, an English speaking community and I feel that this group is really underrepresented in the Knesset at all, but also in the Israeli public, because and I think mostly it's because of the language barrier. They read different newspapers, they hear different newscasts. Some of them even today, when it's easier, so many of them get the news from the US or from the UK. They don't even watch Israeli TV because of the language barrier, and then some of them watch Facebook pages like yours, but some of them are not, and sometimes they feel themselves more connected. And I see it with family. They see themselves more connected to Jews living in New York than to their neighbors across the street, and the language barrier has a lot to do with it. And I think I can help if you listen to. I can make conversation in English, and that's already break one major barrier when you're trying to solve this issue. Also, personally, my children and my wife are American citizens. I file taxes on both sides of the ocean. Not for myself. I'm an Israeli citizen and only Israeli citizen. But I know how is it to what kind of bureaucracy someone who wants to play by the rules in Israel and in the U.S. and has to face opening a new business in Israel when you're a dual citizen might be a big problem. It can be solved. You need to take care of it with in the Knesset.
Like what? Like what are you talking about? What kind of problem can you run into?
When you're today we're in Israel, if you want to start a new business and you are an American citizen and you either open a firm, a company, and then you pay a lot of expenses for opening company for accountants and stuff. But if you want to operate as a small business and not open a company in Israel, then you have to pay almost double, even triple the amount of taxes, because you pay double Social Security and you get none of the benefits, or almost none of the benefits of paying Social Security. You don't get the health care, but you pay for the health care on both sides of the ocean. For example, and there are all kind of those things can be solved in a higher level politics and negotiation between Israel and the U.S. But someone needs to address this issue. Someone needs to put it on the table and press on this issue. That's just one small example. There are other issues. People are preventing themselves from being in Israel for too long because of the tax issues, and that's more of a problem for high income families. But the first problem was more for low income families problems, and of course the bureaucracy. People coming, they're not used to the system. The system in Israel is very different, and a lot of the part of the issue of where are the most people coming in the Aliyah from the law of return. A lot of the focus on the Aliyah, on the absorption ministry is focused on Russian immigration, on Ethiopian immigration, or other kind, and the for the large communities that speak English, you have nefesh b'nefesh, which is a volunteer organization. They get some, but it actually came from the bottom up. It wasn't until Nefesh B'Nefesh started working very seriously. The Ministry of Absorption almost did not know what to do with the people coming from the US or the UK or from Australia. So you need to have someone whose those issues are close to him, you understand the language, and wants to solve the issues. And again, Bezalel Smotrich is my teacher in politics and my mentor. And I think that he's the best example of how to have a congressman, even in a system that you don't have congressmen. Because when he was in the Ministry of Transportation, he was the minister, and people, when the bus came late, people sent him a WhatsApp, and he solved this issue. He is available for the public in ways. I hope I will be available as half like Bezalel Smotrich and still be like miles ahead of most Knesset members and ministers in Israel. But that's the case.
Very good. Okay, so I just want to say that my friend Chaim Davies, who owns a small business that is one of the sponsors of our show called Prohibition Pickle, that has a beautiful store now.
Amazing! I have to stop you. Amazing store. I recommend. I go there every Friday. Sadly, on Purim it was closed, but I go there every Friday. Go there. It's
That's
amazing.
Right. That's right. Prohibition Pickle at Somet Gush, the Gush Junction. It's really fun. So he writes, Chaim says, as a small business owner in Israel, it's a huge concern. Double taxation, shocked that it's still a thing. So let's work on that. And I have another question coming up from Noah Joseph, but I want to wait on his question. Okay, good. And if you, by the way, Simcha, I think that Chaim will obviously get you, a gratitude. Special pickles that you like if you work on this.
No, I can't accept gifts. I'm, the police
Fine.
is after us.
That's right. Okay, good point. Let's get to an issue that is not specific to Anglos in Eretz Yisrael at all. It's actually Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. Look, in my job as the spokesman for the Jewish community of Hebron, I am seeing how the Palestinian Authority is just building and taking land nonstop, and we're really losing chunks of the land of Israel. I'm not even talking about areas A and B, which sadly our state has given over control to the Palestinian Authority. I'm talking about area C, and I'm talking about, for example, in Hebron, building in such a way as to crush the small Jewish community of Hebron in order to stop it from building, and out the window here in Gush Etzion. And my friends who are really hardcore landholder honors here in Gush Etzion and other places, we're seeing a wholesale land takeover. This is part of what's called the Fayad plan, in which really the Palestinian Authority is working on two heads. One head is delegitimization, and the other head is a quiet land takeover. Not terrorism, not planning bombings, just slowly but surely capturing land. Now, you started an organization called Meshilut, but we all know of a famous organization called Regavim, which tracks these efforts of the Palestinian Authority to take away land, but it's not being stopped. Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu, as my wife said, one day his face is going to be on the money, because he's done so many great things for the Jewish people. But when it comes to land theft in Judea and Samaria, and the land theft in the Negev and in the Galil and the Golan as well, and the Galil especially as well, we are seeing really what we call ozlat yad, like a weakness of the state of Israel. How is your party, which is slated, in a good case scenario, to be, not one of the huge parties in the Knesset, how is it going to change? I know that you guys are the Eretz Yisrael party. We're so concerned about this issue. How are you going to tackle this already institutionalized land theft?
Okay, so of course, as you mentioned, we had the Eretz Yisrael party, and you're from Hebron, so you know that when you visit Hebron, you can't miss Orit Struk, number 5 in our list, who is basically when you talk about Eretz Yisrael and you talk about Judea and Samaria, you talk about Orit Struk. She is the head of the Eretz Yisrael lobby in the Knesset for many years.
The caucus, Eretz Yisrael caucus, yeah. Right?
Yes, different terms around the parliamentarian world, and and she was and pushed forward many important decisions and laws regarding Eretz Israel. But it's a real problem, I think the same way I told you about the justice system, the same way about Eretz Israel. If you know what you want and you have a plan, the Likud and Netanyahu, you can pull them to the right. They really a lot of my friends are in the Likud. I appreciate most of them, and the people that I don't appreciate in the Likud, most of them already left the Likud for various reasons. And there are people, very good people, but they need to have a strong ideological party to pull them to do the right thing that they believe that that's the right thing, but it's focused on ideology. So it's about the justice system. It's one thing. About Eretz Israel, the same thing. Bezalel Smotrich was the one who is the initiative to have Chok HaSdara, the settlement law, that to create the people that went and bought houses from the state of Israel in Judea and Samaria, paid mortgages, got themselves all the approvals, and then for some reason their houses were declared, we have some problem with the land, and they're left without anything, and you need to solve this issue. And he pushed forward this legislation, and all the Likud followed suit. It's okay, and it passed in majority of 61 Knesset members. Not a problem. But you need to have someone who knows what to do, have to plan. As you mentioned, Regavim is a Bezalel Smotrich organization. He started it. He's the founding father of those fights about the land of Israel. He knows what to do. But specifically about Area C, we already have a draft of a government decision that will give the right tools and budget to the army, who is in the control of the land, and to the municipalities, to everyone, to fight this land takeover in Area C. And this is already set. And of course, because we are a land today governed by the Attorney General and the political instability, Gantz, the minister of the defense minister, and he was also the justice minister at the time, prevented it from passing. And he said, I can't do it. You can't do it. It's election time. Excuse. It was an excuse, but doesn't matter. We have a system that we didn't have a right-wing government, or any government for that matter, in the past 2 years. We have to have 100% right. I know you said right-wing means different things across the ocean, but we're in Israel. Right-wing in Israel means one thing: a Jewish state. Is that what it means? In Israel, it doesn't mean anything else. If you are for a Jewish state, for the state of Israel to remain the homeland of the Jewish people, that's the right wing in Israel. And for some strange reason, and a dangerous reason, some other parties who have good people in them, they transfer votes from the right to the left in Israel. And you're voting for them, and they say, according to all the polls, we were going to have 80 Knesset members, 80. The Knesset will be formed of 80 Knesset members that are, if you ask them personally, they will tell you, I am committed for the right-wing values of Israel, to the state of Israel being Jewish, to reform the justice system, to allow settlements, then to allow the settlements to thrive and to fight Area C land takeover. They will tell you all that. They would even say we're opposing a Palestinian state, and most of them, and then they say, okay, yeah, but we hate Netanyahu. That's why we're going to form a government with the Reform Rabbi number 4 in Avodah, or with Yair Lapid, with the left-wing parties in Israel, and they will let them basically veto any change in the foreseen future. So that's a real danger in the next election. And the parties that are saying so, they're saying we are not willing to commit to a right-wing coalition, to a right-wing government. Gideon Sa'ar, who says, I will never sit with Netanyahu. Bennett says, I will be the prime minister, and I'm not saying that I'm going with the right, and I'm willing to do this with the Avodah and Yesh Atid. That's a real danger, that the right, you will vote right and you will get left. And that's something that we can't allow.
All right, so just to remind people, Israel has 120 Knesset members. In order to rule, it has many parties, and in order to rule, you need to make a coalition. In Israel, the Likud will get at best, let's say 33, 34 seats. It has to make a coalition with other parties, nationalist parties, if it wants to have a nationalist government. And today, it's not so simple. So let's talk politics for a second. I think most of my listeners want to talk about issues and want to talk about what's important, what's right. But in Israel, it's not just about what's important, what's right, but how it works. And so, okay, you're talking about, Bennett may, at least according to his statements, may be willing to go with let's call it a centrist government. But at the end, you need Bennett probably, because you're gonna, let's say people want to vote for National Religious Party, which is the Religious Zionist Party, Religious Zionism, which is the letter Tet. That's how you vote this in this coming election. That's the call sign for your party. Okay, you can expect, best case scenario, 5-6 seats. Wow, that's great. But you still need a government. And that government, as far as I understand what you're thinking about, it's a Likud-led government. That Likud government, according to the math, is close. It's very close to form that. And it's not going to get all those 80 so-called right-wing or nationalist.
That's the problem.
Right.
That's the problem.
Okay, so how do you? Okay, so I've got a lot of my friends are Likud voters, are Bennett voters. They're excited about religious Zionism, but give us a forecast about how we can expect. Oh, and another thing is, voting for your party is like, in some ways, voting for Netanyahu. It's like voting for a coalition with Netanyahu, but keeping him more right. Give us a kind of scenario about how people should understand what potentially a coalition could look like.
Okay, so we can talk about it in a second, but I have to emphasize, voting for us is voting for a right-wing government. The fact that Netanyahu is the prime minister, if the election in Israel, it's not like the election in the US. We are not voting for a president by itself. We're voting for the Knesset. So if the vote is about Netanyahu, yes or no, Netanyahu won all past 3 elections. No one replaced him. He's the prime minister, right? But we have a left-wing government with the prime minister, Netanyahu. Today we have this kind of a strange government where Gantz and other parties, Avodah and other parties, were part of the coalition, and not only they were part of the coalition, they had a veto on any decision. So you couldn't pass any right-wing decision, even though Netanyahu was the prime minister. So and Bezalel Smotrich was not in this coalition because he cannot sit in a coalition that is not right-wing. It is commitment to himself. It is commitment to his voters.
Well, and also the party that he was in, which was the Yamina party, decided to sit it out. It was Bennett's decision.
I have to remind you that the list that he was part of was compiled of 3 different parties, and he could have done what other member of this list do and split. He chose not to do it. And other member, Rav Rafi Peretz, he split and joined. But that's besides the point. That's so the fact that Netanyahu is the prime minister does not guarantee a right-wing coalition. You need to have a right-wing coalition, and the parties that we're talking about, hopefully, of course, Bennett is welcome, and we want him to be, and we urge him to declare that he will only form a right-wing coalition. I really hope he will make this declaration. Until now, he failed to do so, but. If we talk about coalition of Netanyahu Netanyahu party, the Likud, and the ultra-Orthodox parties, Shas and Gimel, and we're talking about the religious Zionism party, and we're talking about Bennett's party, and you get to the magic number 61, you can have a right-wing coalition that all its members are committed to reform the justice system, and all its members are committed to settlements in Judea and Samaria, and all is into the Jewish state and to Jewish education and to solve this giyur, this conversion issue, you can do it. But because one part of the five pieces puzzle that I just mentioned says, I will not, don't count me in. I might not join this coalition. I might go and form a different coalition when I will be a prime minister, and I will invite to my coalition Avoda and Yesh Atid, the left-wing parties, because he wants to be a prime minister. So I think it's a mistake. We just think it's a big problem. But yes, you can actually see and feel it's very close to have a right-wing government. And I hope also Gideon Sa'ar will make the right choice and forget about this, I don't want Netanyahu in any cost. I will never sit under Netanyahu promise he made. I really hope he will do it.
But don't forget when you say that you don't want to sit with Netanyahu, you get a lot of voters who come out from the blue and white party and from those places who really voted for a change of the prime minister. They say Prime Minister Netanyahu, he may have had a lot of successes, but he sat here too long. It's, even in America they have term limits. It's time to change horses here, and so that's where they're banking on.
Anyway, and if you can do it by forming a right-wing government, no problem. Or it's that we mentioned before. No one will question her ideology. She just said it today. If it's a right-wing government, no problem. But there is no right-wing government. We remember how it was in 2013 to 2015 when Yair Lapid was part of the government. It was not a right-wing government, although it was the majority in the government was right-wing, but the minority in the government basically blocked and pushed forward, blocked any right-wing policy and pushed forward left-wing policy. That's the way, because with the help of the court and the justice system.
Simcha, we are talking with Simcha Rothman, who is he's an advocate and the founder of the Meshilut governance organization, which fights against government bureaucracy and for separation of powers, checks and balances. And by the way, in a conversation that I had with him one time, I had a conversation with you, I by mistake said separation of shul and state, or church and state, and you jumped at me and said, well, definitely not separation of synagogue and state. That's not what you mean. You mean separation of powers, but not that other American ideal. Why did you get so animated when I said that by mistake?
Because Israel, unlike the U.S., is a nation state based on the Jewish people, and you can't separate religion from the Jewish people. The Jewish people and its religion are one. Not, as I said before in the beginning, not everyone observe every part of the religion. Not everyone abide to every rule of the halacha. But you can't separate the religion, the Jewish religion, from the Jewish people, and that's why you can't separate the Jewish religion from the Jewish state. If you don't want the Jewish state, the very sure path to do so is to say, oh, we won't have any recognition or connection to the Jewish religion of the Jewish state.
All right, speaking of the Jewish religion, and we're starting to wind down here, but there are questions coming in, and I'd like to urge all the folks watching right now on Facebook, YouTube, and Periscope to write in a comment and a question, and I'll be sure to do my best to get that to Advocate Simcha Rothman. And also, folks listening on podcast, please write me an email, yishai@yishaifleisher.com. Let me know what you think. Let me know who you're excited about for the Knesset. Let me think who you're talk to me. Don't be embarrassed to tell me who you're thinking about voting for, or if you lived in the land of Israel, who you would be voting for. Would love to hear from you. So that's yishai@yishaifleisher.com. And let us see a question by my good friend Noah Joseph, who writes, tuning in for the first time in a long time. Great show so far. Yishai, question. What is Simcha and Religious Zionist Party's position on the Rabbanut's monopoly on state religious issues, even within Orthodoxy? Why should national religious rabbanim, rabbis from the national religious stream, not be running the national religious institutions? The Rabbanut.
Okay, so the Rabbanut, the Rabbanut issue is very complicated because you need to have, first you want to have a one state recognized synagogue, for that matter, that everyone can live with, because otherwise you didn't do anything. You have you will have people, everyone having their own list, who they can marry, who they cannot, where they can eat, and also on kashrut issues. If the army in Israel keeps kosher, you need the kosher standard for the army be one standard that's recognized by the people that you want to join the army. If the standard of of kosher will be privatized as a general rule, then which one of the companies will get to give kosher stamp to the army, and what will you do with the people who does not abide by this kosher stamp? So you will say, oh, don't come to the army. It doesn't work like that. It's an issue that it's really might be hard for people who are not living in Israel to understand, but in Israel there are some issues. So marriage and conversion and kashrut, which are the main issues that we're talking about, and needs to be supervised by the government.
Right, but that's a good introduction. That's a good general introduction. But like Noah's asking specifically about the issue that when you go today to divorce court, to the Rabbanut divorce courts or family courts, and many of the things dealing with the Rabbanut, especially getting married, it's always the ultra orthodox that are there.
Okay, so of course, we want to change that. Of course, the religious Zionism party have a lot of reforms needs to be done by this in those institutions, and for just some people would think it's the other way around, but when you have the secular parties deal with those issues, they are more willing to give in, to the ultra-Orthodox than the Zionist religious party, because they don't really understand the issues sometimes. Why would they pick a fight with their coalition partners on an issue that they don't have a real interest in? Sadly, I think they should have interest, but the fact of the matter is they're not. So the only way to really fight on those issues and bring in the religious Zionist point of view into effect, into the Rabbanut, and on Shemitah issues, we're nearing the Shemitah year.
The seventh year sabbatical, the sabbatical issues of not eating certain products during the seventh year.
Mm-hmm. Not eating, and how do you grow produce in the land, and on Shabbat issues, and on, as you said, as the divorce courts and rabbinical courts, all those issues. The only way to change is to give the power not to the secular parties who don't really care about those issues or either want to destroy those institutions or whatsoever. By giving the power to the religious Zionist party, we can get better dayanim in. We can change and we can change the system much better than voting to a secular party that wants to destroy the system.
Mm-hmm. And this is, I just want to make it clear that when we're talking about different streams in Judaism, the ultra-Orthodox are a coalition partner and also a life partner of the religious Zionist world, and it's important to understand that. Although pet peeve for myself personally is one of the things that drives me crazy, speaking of the Rabbanut, is the sign when you go up to the Temple Mount to pray in Judaism's holiest place, that it says that the Rabbanut has decided that it is against Torah to go up to the Temple Mount. That is one of the painful Rabbanut decisions. Simcha Rothman, I want to thank you so much. I'll give you kind of 1 minute, 60 seconds for any last comments that you want to address people with. And then let's wrap it up.
Okay, so thank you very much for having me. I really want to be in touch with people who are listening to this, or maybe in podcast, and maybe afterwards in podcast, but also on the live view. Feel free. I really want to be available for you. My Facebook page is open for messages. Also, I can get phone calls. I get everything, but I want to be available for you. I want to hear what are the problems needs to be addressed. And I think that we're waited for so long to have a government, a right-wing government, to deal with those issues. We need to have the chance. Vote right. Vote right. Make the right choice and vote for the religious Zionist party. Our ticket is Tet. Thank you. Your sound was disconnected.
Oh, look at that. Oh, gosh, I had a little technical problem.
I tried to.
1 second, yeah. Are you
on mute.
Hold on, we had a little technical issue. Well, all right, we had a little technical problem, but we're back. Let me just fix a little thing here. It happens. Technical issues happen. But we'll edit it out on podcast, so don't worry about it. Simcha, can you hear me?
Yes.
I don't hear you for some reason.
I hear you.
Just 1 second. Audio. Okay, Simcha Rothman, I think you can hear me now, and I can hear you as well.
I hear you.
And my friend Josh Wanderer writes, wanted to see if Simcha can read lips. So that's yeah. And my mom says, you have no sound, but we have sound now. But at the same time, we got sound back. And Awet Vicky Petro says, thank you, great show, and shalom. Advocate Simcha Rothman, you are the founder of the Meshilut movement, which works to lessen the Israeli bureaucracy, to create checks and balances like a good government is supposed to have, but at the same time, a government that is maybe democratic, but is part of a Jewish state on the land of Israel. You are running in the Religious Zionist Party. Call sign is Tet, and the vote is March 24th. And that's going to be for which Knesset? It's going to be for Israel's 24th Knesset. And B'ezrat Hashem, it should be a good one. Advocate Simcha Rothman, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
All right, folks. So that was really fun to have Simcha Rothman with us. And you are listening to the Yishai Fleisher Show. Lots more interest in Israeli politics. I don't even like the word politics. I prefer the word leadership. We are working to make the Jewish state stronger and better, an awesome country here in the Middle East, and a power to be a light unto the nations as well. Lots of work to do, and that's the exciting thing, to be part of the process. People like Simcha and many other great leaders are working hard to make our country better. You're a part of it wherever you are. Send me an email, yishai@yishaifleisher.com. From all over the world, and certainly from the land of Israel. Happy to connect you to Simcha and other potential Knesset members or Knesset members as well. Lots of love and lots of blessings from the land of blessings, and shalom.